All right, okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session. So, as usual, what we'll be doing over here is to run through the markets, highlight some of the opportunities available, right? And of course, if you have any questions, just feel free to type it into the chat, and then we'll be able to take a look at them. Okay, there are a couple of potential setups that we're looking at so far. Some of it was from previous week, but of course, um, I think today is also a good opportunity to talk about the pound yen, right? Because last week, we have been looking at that trade setup for the entire week. Price did came very, very close to our entry point, did not really tag the entry. And of course, it just hits towards our target, right? And then I'll talk a little bit about that as well because I think from a psychological perspective, right? From time to time you're gonna experience something like that, and I think it's important to emphasize how we actually deal with that, right? So let's start off with I would say let's start off with that trade or that particular trade idea first, right? Since I think for those of you who've been following this trade idea, would still have this fresh, right? Because I think today we just really get this very nice little move, right? So pound yen over here, since last week, right, we have been looking for opportunities to sell. Um, Obviously, if you have your own setup, you have your own entry criteria, and sort of, you might be able to have capitalized on this move, right? But of course, from the setup that I personally use, um, it came very, very close, but did not tag me in. All right. But the whole direction focus, or I say the directional bias, is very, very clear, right? Last week we did see after this crawl, we had this impulse push, and essentially the market is just basically coming up very, very corrective, right? So we kind of expected this move here, right, based on just patterns itself. So we are looking at the possibility of at least a minimum 123, but of course there's a good possibility that price will even go towards like 198, which is this zone here, right? So if you're in this trade, obviously it's a very, very solid trade. The idea here is you can obviously just manage the position, trail your stops, and then really go for the extended target. But I also want to cover the setups I'm looking at. You can see how close it is, right? I mean, price came towards 200.51. My entry literally is at 200.55, so that's like 4 pips, which is really, really, really tight for a pair like pound yen, right? But it is what it is, right? I've been in my journey of trading, things like this happen. Sometimes we might beat ourselves up too hard, and say that, all right, next time I'm just gonna reduce, or say lower my entry point, so that I can make sure I'm being filled. But you want to be very cautious on that decision because it will go into a spiral cycle, right? So what I mean by that is, now you realize, oh, price came close by almost about 5 pips, did not really tag me in. So next time I'm going to reduce 5 pips, right? But when you reduce that 5 pips, there will also be situation where price came close to your entry by 5 pips and did not actually tag you in. And then you'll be in this visual cycle of keep reducing that 5 pips, 5 pips, 5 pips, right? And then by the time you realize you're no longer trading based on your initial setup already, right? Because your entry, you keep fluctuating on that. So you want to maintain that discipline aspect, and of course, just take it as this is part of it. Sometimes you mistrade, sometimes things like this happen, but it's fine, right? You just look for the next setup. Okay, so I just really want to highlight on that because oftentimes, traders would then just jump to the conclusion, let's just reduce my entry by 5 pips, right? Just bear in mind, as I mentioned, that can really go into a spiral effect. Okay, so since we're on this, right, just very, very quickly cover pound yen here. If you're in this trade, just like I mentioned, you can manage that. The eventual target, I think there's a very high probability price would really be able to head towards 198. Just manage your position if you're in this particular trade. Okay, now, with that said, let's jump back into the dollar index over here. right? So dollar index as of this week, the focus, I would say, shorter term perspective, is that we do expect the dollar to start doing some sort of a correction or a pullback, right? Because last week we did saw dollar making a push higher. Okay. So this week here, we're expecting a simple 1, 2, 3. There's that possibility where we can look for a short-term sell, meaning we're looking at dollar weakness for this week. Okay. So dollar index, that's really, I mean, I don't really trade dollar index itself, but that gives us a perspective that, all right, generally we can expect dollar weakness for the week, right? So then, of course, that would then also open up opportunities on some of this major. However, on euro dollar here, I'm not too keen in looking at a buy. The reason for that is because from here you can see the gap, right, between, if this pulls back, right, the gap here towards the 50 and 618, which is a key area of a retracement, isn't really something that excites me, right? It's the room for profit potential is not really huge. Okay, so for that reason, I'm really not too keen to look for the short-term buy, at least on the euro dollar. But obviously, there are some other pairs that we can look to capitalize on dollar, short-term dollar weakness. Okay, just not on the euro dollar pair. So my take on euro dollar is that short-term, we can see price really retrace towards the 50 and 618 Fibonacci, and of course, that might also opens up the sell side opportunity. Okay, if you can see a setup here, we'll be also interested in looking at the sell side on the euro dollar. Okay, so that's the take on this. Okay, hey, I see a quick question here from Irene. Noel also commented, yeah, I did check on the mic, so I think this time around should be better. Yeah, so Irene mentioned about the 67. Yeah, I mean, the price feed, good observation, right? The price feed on the FX pairs may differ for some of this pairings. Okay, now to be honest, the difference here is really not huge, right? Because to me, I'm using all my analysis, I'm using TradingView, right? The TradingView data feed I'm using is from you can see over here, right? Browse through FXCM. Right now, I don't trade on FXCM, but I'm analyzing the price feed. I'm analyzing the charts based on FXCM data. So obviously, if you're trading on slightly different brokers, like for me, I trade on FTMO, right? The pricing or the price data might be slightly different, right? Which means this highest point in FXCM data fit is 201.26, right? You can see that. But on other brokers, it might not be at 201.26. It might be 201.28. It might be 201.24, for example. Okay. And of course, then that would also impact the Fibonacci ratios itself. Okay. But as long as I think it's not too far of a difference, like, because in FXCM is 200.57 based on 67, right? But if you pull it on your chart, 67 Fibonacci retracement may be at like 200.508, right? Which is essentially about 5 pips. Again, as I mentioned, 5 pips on pound yen as a pair is really nothing. Okay, it's very, very small. So obviously, if you, based on your actual broker data feed, to pull the fibs and key in an entry price at 200.5, for example, then great, right? You would have catch this very, very nice move and potentially would have already hit your full take profit of about 1:2 on average risk to reward ratio. Okay. Yeah, so again, there are that smaller details from time to time here and there that differs. But overall, I'm just taking as like, all right, if you got in, you got in. If you don't, then just look for a next trade, right? The thing here is you do not want to kind of like fine tune it too much to the extent that it becomes a never ending process of fine tuning, right? Yeah, so again, the observation of that difference, it's very, very common, right? But this is more applicable to more volatile pairs, right? I mean, if you go to euro dollar, the difference might be maybe less than 1 pip. There will still be some differences because every broker's data feed is different, right? The liquidity providers are also slightly different. Okay. Good. Okay, so coming back to the pound dollar. Okay, so pound dollar over here, again, I'm looking at this pair as a potential opportunity to capitalize on the dollar weakness in the near term. Okay, adding on to that pound dollar here, what we see is a very nice little reaction from this low, right, where you can see potential double bottom. The reaction of that is also very nice, right? We have a mini V shape, and if today we can get, or I wouldn't say today, right, but moving forward, if we can get some nice little correction here, we can definitely expect more upside, right? And just now I mentioned, right, euro dollar are not too keen to look at the short-term upside, but you can see the difference between euro dollar, right, the room towards that 50 and 618 versus the pound dollar over here. Obviously, the pound dollar offers a bigger room for upside potential, right? And that's where I kind of like utilize the understanding of context again, right, in the entire framework of DSC, to kind of like filter off and focus on one particular pair, right? Knowing that euro dollar and pound dollar, they are more or less correlated as well. Okay, so if you go over to the pound dollar, again, I shared this with you guys this morning as well. Obviously, we need to have price really coming down first, right, before we take the entry. However, if of course price continue to just go up a little bit, it doesn't change the entire thing, right? Probably we need to readjust that swing high towards the recent one, but even if this goes up a little bit and this starts pulling back, the entire setup is still technically valid. Okay, which means this is still a swing low. Then of course you update swing high. Our entry will be slightly higher, but it's fine. Okay, now this setup, there isn't a very clear liquidity sweep in terms of the hourly, but of course if you go back to the 4-hour, you can see that actually swept the previous 4-hour low, right? So to me, I think that's fine. We had this as an impulse push. We have this fair value gap. Of course, we have the order block aligns around the area as well. So I think generally the setup criteria are there. Okay, if you can get that decent pullback towards like 1.3365, 1.3370, that will be where I'll be looking to get involved in, right? Bear in mind, this is not going to be like a long-term swing position. This is more of like trading the pullback, right? So if you want, you can look at like a very, very simple 1:2 risk to reward ratio, which is basically following the FIB, you get an average of 1:2. If you want to go for extended target, you can go back to the 4-hour time frame and target 3525. 3525 is going to be somewhere there, right? So you can extend your risk reward ratio from 1:2 to 1:3.3, which is pretty good, right? So that's something I'm looking out for as of now, right? Going into this week. Aussie dollar, I'm actually neutral on this. Again, you can see generally the major pairs have similarly, but there's still that smaller differences, right? So among like the three majors here, Aussie dollar is something that I'll probably not be focusing too much on looking at trades. We do get that nice little V-shaped reaction as well, but the market has entered into that key area of 15,618 here. So I'm not too keen to buy it anymore, right? So we just wait and see how price is going to react off that key level or key area around this zone. Okay, so not much on that. Dollar CAD last week did break, or I would say earlier this week, did break off that top. But to me, I think it's still a very, very early sign whether this is really a genuine break or it's just a potential fake break and then the market just reverse, right? Now, as of this early sign, this seems to be pretty corrective overall. If this is going to be corrective, we can then expect more upside, right? Then what we'll be looking at is this entire piece is essentially a correction. Okay, so time will tell. There's really nothing much that I'm going to pay too much. I would say there's really nothing much that I can really focus on dollar CAD as of now. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that aside as well. And obviously then we have dollar yen, right? Which again, this morning I I was looking at a setup as well, but of course, with this recent development, we need to kind of update the setup, right? But you can see dollar yen, the direction is quite clear. We do have this impulsive leg, this massive consolidation, a nice little pop, taking out that high, but then now it's doing a V-shaped rejection, right? So we are kind of expecting a three-wave development, okay? 1, 2, 3. But of course, with this recent move here, we'll probably need to give it a little bit more time. So what can happen is, if I zoom out a little bit, okay, to put things in like a little bigger context, right? What can be doing here is this can simply be A, B, C, okay? Very possible. Okay. So if that's going to be the case, right, then what we can expect is if this is going to be a corrective pullback, this can actually continue lower and even take out that low. Okay, and then that will give us that flat structure, right? So I'm eyeing the possibility of that development. How can we know if that pattern is likely going to develop? Is to see how price is going to react off here. Okay, if price is just going to be a V-shaped bounce like that, then obviously you don't expect the downside, right? We need to see how price is going to develop forward. But if from here price decides to just do a corrective pullback, then that's also a potential setup we can look to sell, and then that would fall into the category as I mentioned just now. Okay, so really want to see for this week here, right? Moving forward, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, our price is going to develop for the dollar yen, right? If it gives us the opportunity to get involved in the sell, then that's pretty good. Okay. Yeah, so that's my take on dollar yen. Just very quickly, this morning we're looking at that setup, right? I mean, this is the high, this is the low. We're looking at a pullback. We can look to sell. But with the recent development, we just need to be a little bit more patient. Okay. Then we have the gold chart. Okay. Obviously gold is super bullish. Also has been extended quite a bit. Okay. I would not suggest to be aggressively looking for buy based on where we are right now. Okay. Are we gonna be looking at sell? If you're looking at more of a retracement sell trade, yeah, there is that setup, that opportunity. Okay. But I don't think the overall trend is likely gonna shift bearish, right? You want to be maintaining more on the bullish side of things. But oftentimes when the market is overly extended, you don't want to be jumping in at a high point. Okay, now is there a chance where this can actually do a significant pullback towards maybe like 3.6 to 3.640 area? Very possible. Okay, so we do have this like huge 4-hour candle, but again, that's only one candle. It doesn't tell us much. I would personally say if you're looking at gold, or if you're like very into gold, just be a little bit careful this week. If price develops clearly, in terms of like coming down like this, continue with an impulse push, and then going into a corrective phase, maybe late this week, early next week, then you can look to capitalize the third move down, okay, as a short-term retracement sell. That will be the closest trade opportunity that I can foresee. Okay, so that's on gold. Silver is more or less the same, right? I mean, these two are more or less the same. So, yeah. Keep an eye on that. I don't encourage you to be jumping into the sell, even if it's a retracement trade too early, right? Because the momentum to the upside is very strong. You always want to have that confirmation, right? And to me, what's a confirmation is essentially an impulse leg, a corrective pullback, right? You need these two pieces coming together to give you that confirmation, to increase the odds telling you that, all right, price would likely hit lower from here. Okay. Then we have crude oil. Again, classic push to the upside, break that top, impulsive reversal, right? So what's next? Okay, I would say right now, okay, you probably want to just be a little bit patient and see how price is going to react at the bottom, right? It has tested this a couple of times, hasn't really been successfully breaking it. We'll want to see if price is going to just bounce back up, okay? Or this time around is going to break through impulsively, okay? So we'll see. This one, you definitely need to see how price is going to react off this. Right now, as of today, right, there's really nothing I can talk about, okay? So that's on crude oil. Really nothing much. Observe how price is going to react off around that low at 62. Okay. S&P 500, I think it's potentially building up a trade opportunity around a key level at 6560. Okay. So 6560 over here, if you put in a channel, right, that would also build in quite nicely. But of course, from where we are to around like 6560 zone, it's still quite a distance, right? Do I recommend to look at the sell side of things? Probably not. Okay, again, S&P, it's quite similar to gold and silver, at least from the trend perspective. It's very strong in momentum to the upside, so probably not looking at the sell side. Okay, so key level 6560. Ideally, you want a corrective pullback, and then when it enters into that key level, that's where you look for an opportunity to buy in. Okay. Pound yen, we talked about it already. Then next we have AUD yen. AUD yen projection is a three-wave development as a flag. But to be honest, there's really no clear setup, right? You can see this is very corrective. This is very corrective. Okay, there's no clear combination. There's no clear setup for me to capitalize on this expectation. So again, AUD yen, probably I'm just going to leave it aside. Really nothing much on that. Okay. Then we have the pound AUD. Okay, pound Australia over here, probably need to update this analysis a bit because price is breaking the bottom. I will quickly just switch it up like this. Okay, now while it's breaking the bottom, you want to be careful. It hasn't really break impulsively below that, right? It's kind of tagging it right now, but there's also the possibility it's a wave pattern. This can actually go back up, test this, and then only start moving, right? So this is your impulse leg. This is your ABC. That is a possible pattern, right? So it's testing the low. So again, I'll be telling you to just see how price is going to react off this low. Okay. Now, if this carries with momentum and have a very, very clean break and then start doing a corrective pullback, then obviously we'll be looking at the sell. Okay, but until then, there's no sell setup, right? There's no sell direction yet. Okay, so that's on the pound AUD. Then we have BTC over here. Okay, just a very, very quick kind of like reference. If I were to put the projection here. Okay. BTC might be doing something like that. It might not be a channel. It might be possibly where this can really break through. But at least from now, the minimum expectation we can look out for as a reference point is here, right? Potentially this is our like initial upside target. Okay. Price did an impulsive push. Okay, so what we want to see from here on is a corrective pullback, potentially towards some FIB key levels here. 15.618 will be great. Okay. So yeah, if you can get something like that, the key area is definitely something we can look out for buy trade setup, right? If you zoom out a little bit, okay, you also want to be aware this can be something like that, right? I mean, it can go back into bigger consolidation. Okay? I would say many traders are gonna trap here. Okay, because that was when the news released Bitcoin breaking all-time high. Then probably a lot of people jump in, and then this happens. So the whole correction can take longer than most people would expect, right? So this can be a 1, 2, and then 3, or even maybe retest this before the pop. Okay, so the whole sequence of development here can take longer than expected. If you're trading, then it doesn't really matter much because you're kind of looking at the shorter term relatively. If you're more like into like long-term Bitcoin investment, right? But hope you want to plan out maybe in different levels of entry. Okay, so you don't put like your entire entry in one position, right? You might want to break that down to maybe 3 to 5, right? So that number one, if you break that, you don't miss out if price doesn't fully retrace into the target areas that you intend. So you can scale your entry accordingly. You can like put one position in first. If price doesn't go lower, then at least you're still involved in the trade, right? But if price decides to pull back deeper, then you have like more bullets, right, in a way, to add on to the position, right? So if you're looking at like kind of long term building up your position, then that's something you want to look into as well. Okay. Yeah. So this is what I have so far for this week. To be honest, not a lot. There are definitely like good opportunities that did not get me involved in, right? There are opportunities that are building. There are also opportunities that might build up later part of this week, right? So we'll see. Okay. Cool. Hey, so I see questions from Marvin about dollar Canadian and gold. I think we did talk about those already, right? Dollar and gold. It's always in my list. And then euro pound. Okay, let's take a look at euro pound. Okay, euro pound is kind of testing the top, or say about to test, or depending on how strict you are. Whenever price, right? So a little hint and tip. Okay, whenever price is coming very very close to the top or bottom, you always want to anticipate and expect price to break it, right? And then you start to draw clues into the patterns that price is developing, right? So if price were to break it, this looks very, very crawlish. Okay. So if that's very, very crawlish, there's a good possibility this break might be a fake break, and then this might be reversed down and then potentially coming back lower. So we're doing a little bit of like scenario planning. Okay, based on the context, what would likely be the case. Obviously, price doesn't need to always break it, right? But this is already giving you that corrective crawl development. Now, if this starts to pull back correctively from here, right, then this might pop up, do another break, and then still come back down, possible. Okay. So the thing about, for me, whenever price is nearing a pretty significant top or bottom, I will always like price to break it. I would say I will always anticipate and expect price to break it, and I would want to see how price is reacting after kind of breaking it, right? Then we'll have a better conclusion. Is it going to be a fake break? Is it a genuine impulsive break? Or is a weak break, right? So that will give us more clue going forward. What can we expect, right? So if I zoom out a little bit more, you can see that this area here is not just from this previous high in July this year, but it goes all the way to April this year as well. Okay, so it's pretty significant area, right? So you definitely want to pay attention on like how price is gonna continue from here. As I've described, right? If it's just gonna be a little break and give you an impulsive, hey, wait for this, and then that's your sell opportunity. All right. Good. So that's on the euro pound side of things. Dio here asking to take a look at dollar franc and Dogecoin. Okay. Right. So dollar franc. This was some of the analysis we've done previously. Price came in. Move this. We did had a pretty nice tag here. Then of course price reverses pretty sharply. Okay. So if I were to update the view here, that would definitely be your invalidation. All right. I would then expect price to do something like that. And then we can expect more upside. Okay, but of course, bear in mind we can look at it as a trend line over there as well. Okay, so your key level is definitely 0.72, sorry, 0.7920 to 0.79. If price enters into that territory, that's where you can look out for opportunities to buy. Okay, that's where you can look out for opportunities to get involved in the buy trade. And of course, from here, we do expect price to break out of this trend line. Potential final target will be just where that swing high is, right? Yeah, very possible. Okay, I don't trade the dollar franc, but I feel that the dollar franc does has a very nice clean structure over here that you can look out for a buy trade. Okay, of course, there are some things that are setting up already. You have this low that's taken out, right? So that's potentially your H4 liquidity sweep. You have built up a higher high, higher low. Okay, you have taken out that high here as well. If this gives you a corrective pullback, this can be an internal liquidity as well, which lines up very nicely with the 618. And then if the lower time frame gives you that nice little setup, okay, then this kind of aligns very nicely, right? You have like multiple confluences coming together. Okay, so that's on dollar franc. Dogecoin. Based on 4-hour chart here, seems to be bearish focus, I would say. But of course, the key here is potentially something here, right? You want to wait for the pullback, right? So you can like confluence there. Fib areas perspective, it's gonna be somewhere around that 50. If you do from the swing high, it's around there as well, 50 and 618. I would say look out for the area, right? Of course, if you stretch that, that's there as well. Okay, couple of things we can look into just for reference, right? We might not trade all these technical patterns, but yeah, what can develop here if you are familiar with head and shoulder? Okay, this can be a right shoulder pattern. Okay, so key area 0.2550, 0.2630. Okay, that is potentially where you can look up for itself. Right, but first, given this pullback is corrective, right? Because if this just push up impulsive, then it builds into a slightly different pattern. Okay. Yeah, so that's on Dogecoin. All good. Oh, yeah. So generally, that's really what I have for the week. Okay, couple of opportunities there that we are looking. As I mentioned, some of them probably would develop closer towards the end of this week. And of course, also bear in mind, right? We are transiting into October, so we do have the latest upcoming NFT. Let me just double check to make sure it's happening. Yeah, it's happening this Friday, right? Yeah, so that would really build up quite nicely into some of this major pairs because of dollar movement. Okay, so better in mind as well. Oftentimes when there's a high impact news of the week, right, like NFP, the few days before the news, generally market would just go into a consolidation phase because traders are just gonna be like waiting for the news, right? So then you want to be patient on it, right? You don't want to rush things through. Okay. Yeah. Again, my approach towards trading is always believing in quality over quantity, right? We don't go for like, oh, I need to take like 1 trade a day. On average, we take about 2 to 3 per week, sometimes more, sometimes less. Average out is about 2 to 3 a week. That's perfectly fine. Okay, because if out of that 2 trades, maybe 1 break even, 1 hits our target profit on average, maybe 1 we have a small loss, and then maybe one we manage to take profit at full. You still come out pretty decent, right? From a week to week to a month to month basis. Okay, so just be patient sometimes. When there's nothing, you don't want to rush things through. All right. So that's all from me for today's part over here. Hopefully give you guys some ideas and insights into preparing for the week, right? And what to look out for. Okay, so all the best for this week, and I'll keep you guys updated as usual. Okay, you guys, good night.